Thanks, guys, for being on, especially in the light of everything that's a little bit crazy. But I appreciate you guys taking time to go ahead and jump on to the session here. Just as a quick introduction, those of you guys who don't know me already, my name is Sheldon Dillingham. Together with my wife, Tashina Dillingham, we are the owners of Avitrol Corporation, and have been so for almost 10 years now. For those of you guys who interacted with us early on, it's been that long now, which is pretty crazy. We've been involved in Avitrol in one way, shape, or form for actually about 16 years or so. So it's been a little bit. But our organization is comprised heavily of sales and support teams, really designed to help support service providers and then those who have issues with birds and help support them as well. So our team, so you guys have a rounded view of what we do, so that way you have some perspective as we kind of go through this session here. Our sales teams actively sell bird jobs. And then, of course, we manufacture. So we hand those off to you guys as service providers. We do that primarily for our certified teams there. And so I want to be clear about that too, because I get questions about that. We never execute any work. We always hand that off. So it is truly a partnership. And then we also consist of support teams. So our teams help you guys sell and close jobs. Our team sells and close jobs. And then our support teams help assist you as you guys are going through some of the issues with jobs and all those kind of things as well too, the operational side of it and all of that. So I said that to say that when you win, we win. That's really how this works from a partnership standpoint. Our teams are structured and motivated to help you guys, service providers, PMPs, win bird contracts over the long term, maintain, get rid of infestations, all of the above, right? So I just want to give a little bit of context to you guys who maybe haven't interacted with us before. So with that being the case, the goal of this session, because I want to make sure that that's clear on the front side as well too, is that we know that this is a time of pretty intense uncertainty. We've had a lot of interactions with a lot of teams over the last week and a half when really across the country and really across North America, all of a sudden things kind of went a little bit crazy. All the closings started to happen. Travel started to wind down. Of course, with the coronavirus, people have started to place themselves in self-quarantine, and you've got the shelter-in-place orders and all of that stuff. So we know that this is a time of intense uncertainty. From our interactions with teams across North America, a lot of the feedback that we're getting is that a lot of you guys are having a really strong March or have had a really strong Q1, but the outlook over the next 30 days or so, over the next 60 days is a little bit unsure. It's a little bit rocky. We're not really sure what's going to happen. So what I wanted to do and what our team worked really, really hard to pivot to try and bring some value to you here is we want to help you kind of navigate the now to help set up the next. So on our agenda today is to show you what we're doing to assist you. There are a lot of different things that we're doing on our side to help assist you during this time. I want to take some time as well and bring value by taking a look at some potential market opportunities in 2020. Our team has taken some time to do some pretty forensic research and digging, analyzing some of the markets, that kind of thing as well, and then also talk to other teams about it as well, on where we think there may be some potential opportunities. So just because things are a little bit down right now doesn't mean that there is not still opportunity happening right now. Here's the thing that I'll tell you guys. Our guys on this side and the teams that we're working with are actively closing bird opportunities right now and expect opportunities to close within the next 2 weeks as well, right? So again, just because things are a little bit crazy right now doesn't mean there's not opportunity. I'll talk about that here a little bit. I want to take some time also to talk about considering how to reach those markets, things that you can do to reach some of the markets if you're not already in some of those markets. I want to talk about how to execute the work. That is one thing that we had a lot of requests about last year. Of course, we do a lot of certification trainings and that kind of thing. But we also do these webinars, and I've been getting a lot more questions about, hey, can you talk through how to execute the work? What's the ops side of this look like? I want to take some time to kind of talk about that as well. And then the other part of it here is I want to make sure I answer your questions and ensure that you're equipped to remember. It is so very important to me and to our team here that we're bringing you guys value. And one of the best ways that we can bring you value in real time and in the right now is right now on your GoToWebinar panel that you've got there that shows everything on the side of your screen. Usually it's on, I think, on the right-hand side of your screen. There's a little box there that says questions. It's a little box that says questions. Please, man, I can't stress this enough. Please, there are no stupid questions. If you have a question, take a minute as we go throughout this and write that question out. I do intend to take a little bit more of an extended time of questions and answers. I want to try and make sure, again, that I maximize the amount of value that I bring to you in this session. So please leverage that question box. Ask questions, whatever it is, whatever they come to your mind, that kind of thing. And like I said, I want to try and get to all of those questions. I really do. So like I said, I want to try and make sure I bring you some value here today. So with that being said, let's talk about what we're doing to kind of help you out during this time. And one of the things that we're doing is, of course, we're tripling down to help you win. What we're doing right now is we're working harder than ever to check on you guys' status and provide you with assistance on these jobs. So our team has been tasked with and resource reallocated on this side for reach out. So essentially within the next month and a half, somewhere in there, every single one of you guys that we're working with should hear something from us. We are working very hard to establish contact with you, check on you, make sure you're okay, see if you're having any kind of issues or anything like that, whether it be with jobs or getting things to close or just whatever it is, whether you're on the sales or the ops side or anything like that. We're working very hard to get in contact with you guys and provide assistance, right? The other part of it, so you guys kind of understand as well, we also do, like I was saying, a lot of certification trainings. For a little bit of perspective here, over the next 2 months, which is where we had certification trainings scheduled to work with all of you guys as teams. Unfortunately, because of the coronavirus and everything, obviously the travel to come out and work with you guys as teams got put on hold. So unfortunately, there's about 300 guys over the next couple months that are supposed to get training, where they're on hold and not able to get the training that they were looking for to make 2020 a successful start off, inside Q1 or early Q2, right? So we took a look at it as a team and we're like, okay, how can we still provide a significant amount of value? And one of the ways that we're doing that in place of what we were going to do on the search side in the short term for you is we're tripling down on the video-based content that we're providing for your team. So please be looking for it. You'll start to see 1 to 2 videos, maybe more a week released from us that are going to talk about how to do some of these treatments correctly, talk about getting some of these jobs closed and dealing with objections. We'll be releasing video content about tray placement, about the different types. We'll even be releasing some video content on some live stuff. We do plan on doing probably some LinkedIn live sessions, some Facebook live sessions, and different things like that right there on site where some birds are. Talk about treating those, let you guys ask questions and answer those questions in real time. So we are stepping up the amount of resource that we're offering to help your team and help provide some training for your team during this time. We're providing more help on bidding bird jobs. A lot of you guys on the certified side that have gone through our certification program know that we offer a program called Bird Spotter, and that's where because during this time a lot of teams get really busy, for instance, with ants really picking up. And so it's just all they can do to keep up with the ant work that's coming in. So they're not able to pursue some of the bird opportunities like they would be able to outside of ant or maybe termite season. And so one of the things that we normally provide for certified teams is a program called Bird Spotter, where basically if guys are driving past bird opportunities, because you can see them from the road, essentially what they do is they kick those opportunities over to our support team, and our team will actively go out and sell those bird jobs for you, and then hand it back to you. We don't take a commission or anything like that on it. It's a value add for our certified, for guys who've gone through our certified program. We are opening and expanding that out to help you guys during this time, even beyond the certification program. So that's something I would say. Also, type something in the question box or something if you want more info on that, and we'll help you out there. But we're providing that assistance as well. And then, of course, we're working harder than ever to also establish contact with more potential clients to put more locations in your hand that are ready for contracts. We do things a little bit differently here. We don't supply leads. We actually close bird jobs, and then we work with service providers to get a contract in their hand from that point. So we have a lot of services that are designed to help you guys win, is really what I want to summarize. I want to try and make sure that you guys understand our hearts on this side, and our heart and our passion is helping you guys win on all fronts and be successful. So those are some things that we're doing right now. One of the other, and I want to get into some of the meat here and talk about some of the types of markets and where some of the answers are in some of the markets, some things that you're going to want to consider as your team is assessing some paths forward, right? So one of which is what markets are going to be hit hardest. And you could actually put this in almost like a 2-column type category or multi-column type category, and just ask yourself a few different questions. Think about those markets and think about, is this market, is the revenue that comes in from this market heavily contingent on people being present in large groups? So think major stadiums or something like that, right? And are they potentially going to be able to get that revenue back later in the year, or is that very seasonal and there's no way that they're going to be able to recoup that? If that's the case, if you land on the fact that it's very seasonal, that they're not going to be able to recoup it and that kind of thing, these may be markets where you're looking at and determining, man, I think that these markets in the next 30 days, 60 days, whatever it is, may actually scale back their service, in which case, here's what I want to do. I want to focus on some things to help bolster some other markets to help bolster me and my business during that time. I'm also looking at what is my current business demographic. Am I heavy residential? Am I heavy commercial? If I'm heavy commercial, what type of commercial? What's my commercial demo, right? Am I heavy retail, disposable income retail demo? Or am I, heavy just residential in general and only have a little bit of commercial accounts, right? This is where I'm going to pay attention over the next, for sure, 30 to 60 days as to what's actually happening, right? Because if this starts to extend a little bit longer, I'm paying attention to, for instance, maybe what some of the jobless rate numbers start to look like as those are published, right? Because that may affect, for instance, if I'm heavy residential, that may actually affect discretionary spending if there's more layoffs and that kind of thing, in which case, all I want to do, this is not gloom and doom. Remember I said there's still a win inside of the industry and what's happening right now. It's just, I want to make sure that I position my business to take advantage of where those wins are and provide myself some stabilization in the short term and shore some things up in the short term so that I can win in the long term, right? So I'm asking, what verticals should I scale up? What other ones should I scale down? If I've got a vertical that's heavily dependent, for instance, on interior service, and it starts to look like that this is going to stretch out into 60 days or longer, as far as some of the shelter-in-place orders and different things like that, and social distancing. That's where I'm really going to take a look at it and say, okay, let me see if I can scale up some verticals that are specifically exterior service only, while maybe scaling down some of the ones that maybe require internal, my guys to be internal, right? And then a couple of key things that I'm also really going to look at is what markets are going to stay the same and what markets are going to potentially see a bump. Those are the two market segments that I want to focus most of my energy on. What markets are going to provide me some stabilization, what markets are potentially going to actually move forward or actually going to see a vertical move, right? So here are a few markets to consider based on our conversations inside of some of these markets, based on some of our research, and then also based on conversations that we've been having with service providers as well across North America. One of which is grocery providers. Again, these are markets that I'm thinking about, where what markets are being considered essential, whether it be at a federal level or a state level, right? Pigeons, sparrows, starlings, grackles, they are all still going to be issues with some of these grocery providers. And most of us have been in grocery stores, hopefully not to buy toilet paper or hand sanitizer in the last, couple of weeks, because we definitely found ourselves out of luck if that was the case. But we've been in some of those situations and looked around and noticed, man, these shelves are bare. There's a lot of cars in the parking lot. Maybe we need to focus a little bit better on the social distancing piece of it because this place is packed. I think all of us have probably thought a few of these things, but grocery providers are most definitely seeing and will see a bump for sure in the coming weeks, right? A lot of the restaurants that are sit-down restaurants, a lot of them are not offering curbside. Some of them are, but a lot of them are not. And with the shelter in place issues, orders set up, oftentimes there are a lot of guys that are telecommuting. A lot of people are spending a lot more time at home. They're consuming a lot more groceries rather than eating out more, which means that these grocery providers are going to see a bump. I am going to talk about capitalizing on some of the opportunities here in just a little bit on some of these, but I'm just talking about a few of the markets that we're looking at and adjusting our efforts to provide some stability for us in the short term is really what we're looking here for. So grocery providers, food processing facilities, right? Pigeons, sparrows, starlings, grackles, gulls, et cetera, et cetera. Remember, now a lot of these food processing facilities are, and after having conversations with them, we're actually finding a lot of them are making some quick pivots on their side as well, because you might think immediately, well, some of these food processing facilities are heavily dependent on sourcing food into the restaurant industry. A lot of these food processing facilities are making some quick pivots on some of the branding and things like that they're actually putting on some of these food products and repurposing them and sending them into the grocery space. So this food processing and grocery is pretty closely tied in and connected. So what we expect is where they're going to see maybe some losses on the restaurant side, they'll actually see some gains on the grocery side, and at minimum that may end up being a washout. But we actually expect that these will likely see a bump. And remember too, from a regulatory standpoint and all of that, none of the regulatory requirements with regard to FSMA and state requirements and that kind of thing have changed in the light of this as well, which means that these guys still have to pass inspection. They still have to have pest service going, right? And pests, of course, has been labeled in a lot of places in the country as an essential service. Shout out to NPMA and the guys on the national side of things. They are doing an amazing job getting the industry updates and fighting to make sure that service providers and all of us across the industry are set up and flagged as essential services. So if you're not already on their email list or anything like that, I would recommend going to their website. I think it might be npma.org or something like that. Of course, you could Google it, NPMA or National Pest Management Association, and go ahead and sign up on their website. They're doing some really, really great things. I've been really proud of the work that they've been doing and pleased with the work they've been doing. So I promise I don't get a commission or anything like that for the plug. I've just been very, very impressed watching them, watching the work that Dominique and Jim and all the guys on the team over there at NPMA have been doing to try and get us some updates. So anyway, getting back to it, food processing facilities are another one where there's some opportunity. Here's the interesting one, home improvement locations. Now, this is one to keep an eye open for because this is really heavily going to be dependent on what happens from a job standpoint in the next, I'm going to say 30 to 45 days, maybe 60 days or so. what's happening is oftentimes, and some of us are experiencing this ourselves, right? Telecommuting and different things like that. People are spending a lot more time at home, which means they're looking around a lot more. They have a lot more time in their hands, especially with, in a lot of states, like school has been canceled, for instance. The kids are home. Sporting events have been canceled, right? So parents that are having to move kids back and forth from one location to the other for practices and different things like that. A lot of us have a lot more time at home. And so what's happening is people are actually starting to knock out more home improvement projects. A pretty interesting byproduct of the shelter in place requirements and issues and all of that kind of stuff. So the interesting part about these kind of locations is we are right there, right on top of nesting season for these birds, sparrows, starlings, and that kind of thing. And so these cavity nesters historically find a very welcoming place in garden centers. So that's something that I'm going to take a look at. And where I've got a really great combination is if I've got a combination of grocery and garden center, think something like a Super Walmart or something like that. You've got your grocery that's there, but you also have the covered A-frames that are there where you've got garden centers and that kind of thing. Think Lowe's, think Home Depot, think Tractor Supply, think some of the local places with garden centers. These are all areas where we are actually seeing locations and jobs close in the home improvement sector and approvals be slated for 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, different things like that. So there's still opportunity in these. Of course, pigeons, sparrows, starlings, grackles. There are other birds that are in there as well. I'm just kind of focusing on some of the main ones that we're seeing in some of those locations, but there's opportunity there for sure. And then human health services facilities. Now, of course, these ones are a little bit more of a long ground game. So we're talking about hospitals and different places like that where maybe they've got pigeons, pigeons, sparrows, and starlings, pigeons in the parking garage, right? We're protecting human health and safety piece of it. Now, granted, I know that as far as what their focus is currently is on what is happening with the current outbreak. And man, God bless those guys who are putting their health in jeopardy, being close to patients and that kind of thing who are sick with the virus. I mean, they are genuinely potentially taking a hit to help make sure that all of us are healthy. So our prayers are definitely going out to all of the victims that are suffering and the families that are suffering, but also the guys that are on the human health services side, right, that are exposed to it. We've actually had some really great interactions with people that are doing things to help. A lot of companies have started to repurpose resource, start to donate some of the masks that they have and some of the PPE that they have to human health services, hospital facilities, and different things like that. I even had a great conversation with one of our distributor partners that services the ag industry, and in their community, they've actually started even making and manufacturing some of these masks in a little bit more of like a groundswell type of way, getting the community involved and that kind of thing. And it's just been pretty amazing to watch people come together during this time. So know that obviously if we're talking about human health services, hospitals, that kind of thing, their attention is going to be diverted a little bit in the short term. But what we will see, over the coming quarters, because from a revenue standpoint, from a business standpoint, they're seeing a bump during this time. What we will see is a lot of these approvals start to go through. So with these guys, these are ones where you're setting up some of what that business is going to look like, hopefully in Q3 and Q4 and different things like that. So the question might be, if you're not already servicing some of these clients or don't have a lot of these types of clients, what is the path towards reaching some of these types of clients? How do I take advantage of it? So a few things to keep in mind. And remember too, by the way, like I said earlier, I know I'm talking about going through some of the market and looking at that. I am also going to talk about executing these treatments as well. So hang with me. I'm going to get to that as well too. a couple things that I'm looking at if I'm looking to reach some of those markets is one, can any existing clients that I have actually provide me with referrals, whether I have one hospital, for instance, or if I've got one garden center location or something like that, and I'm wanting to reach more of them, can they help provide me with any referrals into that market? The other thing that I would ask, and I talk a lot about this in some of these sessions, but in the certification training, and of course, man, I am a huge fan of the LinkedIn platform, particularly since Microsoft took it over. It has gone to a whole new level. I mean, we're talking 500 million users. And here's the interesting part. When I talk about social media, right, it's funny when I talk about social media and I talk about the business space. I'll ask guys in the room, I'll say, how many of you guys have or have had at one point a Facebook product, whether it be Facebook or Instagram or something that falls under the Facebook umbrella, right? And the interesting part is it'll be 90% or to 90 to 100% of the room, their hands go up, right? And it'll be like, okay, well, that's interesting because all of you guys are in the business space. I think a lot of times people assume that because we're talking about social media, that our target that we're looking for is not on there. And they most definitely are on there. Here's the interesting part on our side from a marketing standpoint. For those of you guys that don't know as well too, my background is in technology and also in marketing, and then of course on the bird side, like as we've moved kind of into this, right? So this is one of those things where I personally have had a lot of experience and exposure to, but when we're talking about some of these platforms, some of these social platforms, the interesting part is on our side, we see leads come in from like the 65-year-old plus demo, bird leads come in on the 65 years old plus demo on Instagram stories. And those of you guys who are familiar with Instagram stories, where you're kind of swiping through and you've got some of the video or still images and it's just kind of this continual feed that's there. Are maybe like picking your jaw up off the floor right now. Like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Like you guys get farm leads for bird jobs from the 65 plus demo on Instagram stories. That's incredible. We live in this incredible time frame where social is amazing and a critical part of every business. And so here's the thing. It doesn't have to be like a full scale marketing campaign where your marketing department has to do all of this stuff. If we're talking about a social platform like LinkedIn, really what you want to do is leverage some of the searching tools, really delve in there, take some time. As you have more time, if some of you guys are telecommuting, if some of you guys are sales guys, right, and are trying to figure out how to get in contact with clients, take some time and figure out the LinkedIn space. I highly recommend it. There's some incredible in-depth searching mechanisms that you can leverage to actually figure out who your contact is and essentially make a cold contact warmer by establishing contact on the front side. Maybe one of these webinars, or maybe I'll do a video or something like that on leveraging the LinkedIn platform for the bird control space. It's something I've thought about. Comment in the questions box or something like that below if you guys think that that's a good idea. If I get enough comments on that, I think I'll go ahead and look at putting a video like that out. The other thing to think about is, are you running online ads, right? Obviously, the LinkedIn space is really, really expensive to run ads in. If you guys have walked down that road at all, Facebook and Facebook products are a lot easier to start running ads on from there. Google used to be the big thing, but what's funny is I'll be in rooms and I'll ask guys, hey, how many of you guys, when you search something on Google, you click the ads that are on the top? And it's like no hands that go up. Why is that? Well, man, we have been trained, right, over the last like 15 to 20 years since all of us have been Googling it. We've been trained to kind of skip right over those ads, right, and go on to the next thing. Even though they took away that big yellow box that was on the top up there, even though they took away that box, we've still kind of trained ourselves when we see the word ad next to it just to skip right past it, right? So I would actually say that if you're investing a whole lot in the Google platform, it might be something that you might want to rethink. I would actually look at maybe diverting funds and looking into investing a little bit more in Facebook products products, investing a little bit more in YouTube. I'm not saying all of Google products, right? YouTube is a Google product, but I would look at maybe investing in the YouTube platform and video content. There's some amazing stuff that you can do with pre-roll for guys that would be very interested or would be your demo, that you can run some very targeted ads at, targeted video at on the YouTube side. That's pretty amazing. I would also ask, how well do you understand and how well are you tracking your ad metrics? This is about ROI, and that's the cool part of the time frame that we live in currently. From an advertising standpoint, there is no reason anymore to be spending money on ads and not know exactly what your conversion rates look like, exactly what people are viewing, how long they're on it, all of that kind of stuff, right? Just so make sure that if you're investing, make sure you're really getting the ROI on it. Do your ads focus on a single or multiple verticals, right? So if I'm going after bird and I'm going after bird in the home improvement sector, one of the things that I'm wondering about if I'm running ads is, man, if I know that birds are nesting in garden centers and I want to take advantage of this, what I'm not going to do is run ads that are focused on my 60 different verticals, right? Because all of a sudden my message becomes very, very diluted and I'm having a really, really hard time now getting some of the conversions that I would be looking for. Instead, I'm going to run ads that are really, really focused on let's say the home improvement sector. And the cool part about the digital marketing piece is you can really fine tune some of this kind of stuff and target specifically, different types of demos for different types of ads. So I could have 10 different ads running if I wanted that had different verticals in them and specifically target titles or businesses, and different things like that, right? So these are things I'm thinking about. And then, is my landing page simple to navigate, right? If people are clicking on something, is it simple to navigate? Is it specific? And is it compelling? Those are three things that I'm asking myself. Take a minute. If you have landing pages, take a minute after this. Take a look at your landing pages. Ask, are these simple? Is this really, really easy to understand, or somebody have to scroll for like 10 days, basically, to really find out what's being talked about? Is it specific, right? Is it bird specific? Is it issue specific? And is it compelling? Is that call to action compelling? And again, I'm not going to get into all the in depth on how these landing pages should be and all of that. That's kind of a different segment. Again, if I kind of touch on something a little bit, because this is kind of a shotgun here. If I touch on something a little bit and you think it's a good idea, or you'd like to see a video or some content on something like this, post that in that question box there. Give me some feedback. I love to see the feedback. And B, it helps me and helps us provide you guys with more value in these sessions, right? And as we're putting this content out, of course, we want to make sure we're putting out content that helps you. But the thing is that these sources can help provide you guys with the leads right now and help you guys move forward in the right now. As you're marketing in some of these spaces, right? So obviously there are a few different benefits of these kind of markets and this type of approach. One, baiting for birds at these locations provides you with an opportunity for exterior only service. Most of the time, these treatments are going to be done on the exterior of the building. And of course, with the social distancing and all that stuff in place, a lot of companies are very, very apprehensive to move forward with interior service currently, right? So this allows you an opportunity and a path for exterior service. These programs allow you to set up a recurring monitoring service. And the nice part that you guys know from a lot of the other verticals that you have where you've got a recurring service set up, it provides stability because there's something that's coming in on a regular basis. And that's really what we're looking for during this time, are services that provide us with stability. Even if only a percentage of these close over the next 30 or 60 days, these proposed locations are at least potential clients that are in your sales pipeline that you'll start to see closes on later on in the year. So that's our worst case, right? If it doesn't close in 30 days, what's it look like in 60 days or 90 days, or what's it look like in Q3, et cetera, right? And then there's also currently a big focus on the negative repercussions of human-wildlife contact and overall disease prevention based on what all is happening. Unfortunately, with the outbreak, what it what it does create is it does create a little bit more of an interest and a little bit more of a focus on human wildlife contact and preventing people from contracting disease, right? So I've talked about in other sessions of 3Ds: disease, distraction, and destruction, and leveraging those 3Ds as you're communicating with clients. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of depth on that. I do have some previous sessions. If you want a copy of the video or something, post that in the question box there. I can make sure we get you a copy of the recorded session where I talk about the 3Ds and how to communicate some of that to the client and create some urgency to get them to move forward and take care of the issue. Okay, I want to pivot now from talking about some of the market side of it, and I want to talk specifically about executing the work and get into some of the ops pieces here. So invariably, I always have guys on these sessions who have no type of exposure with what Avitrol is, how to do the treatments, and different things like that. I'm going to take just a quick minute to talk about what Avitrol is if you're not familiar with it. Just really quickly, what Avitrol is it is a treated grain bait. Typically takes the form of like whole corn, mixed grains of like wheat, milo, corn chops, different things like that. We do custom blends and things as well. But it is a treated grain bait with the active ingredient, which is called 4-aminopyridine, impregnated at the core of the bait. Those of you guys who have been around for a really long time may have heard Avitrol referred to at some point as a psychotropic, right? Or LSD for birds or something like that. And I hate to burst anybody's bubble or anything like that. The birds aren't having a bad trip or anything. We're not drug dealers for birds here. Basically, what it does is the 4-aminopyridine temporarily affects their central nervous system, causes them to emit distress signals. Those distress signals then scare the rest of the flock away. And then from there, that flock that you frighten away won't return to the site. That's basically how that works. Birds are very social. They're very communicative. And so what they're doing is they're communicating to the rest of the flock that, hey, there's a problem here with the site. And that's what causes them to leave the site. At the same time, the active ingredient is a K channel or potassium channel blocker. So as the birds are reacting, they're not experiencing any type of pain or anything like that at all. So our treatment goal with this treatment, with baiting treatments, is no kill across the board. And we execute a lot of these with no kill. So as I'm talking about garden centers and as I'm talking about grocery stores in sensitive locations like that, we help teams execute work in sensitive locations like that with no kill at all. Our goal is reaction with complete recovery. I'll talk about what that looks like here in just a minute. A lot of you guys may be familiar with some of the keys to a no-kill job, but one of the biggest keys is limiting the amount of bait, or our dilution ratio. So a lot of you guys are familiar with the fact that here this year we rolled out a product called Easy Blend, and that product comes pre-measured with a pre-measured amount of active and a pre-measured amount of untreated. Comes in a 6-gallon pail, and essentially a service specialist just dumps the active in there, mixes that up for about 60 seconds, and they've got the perfect blend for a no-kill job, right? So that is a product that we specifically have rolled out for sensitive site treatments and that kind of thing, and our team is helping scope projects with this product specifically. I will call your attention to the handout box that's there in the GoToWebinar control panel. There's a handout box, and inside that box there's a PDF document. It says Avitrol Easy Blend information. That handout right there actually has all of the information on Easy Blend. It's a pretty quick, easy read, and also it's pretty easy to get to your client. So it's also client facing as well. There are some keys to a no-kill treatment. There are a few keys. One of which is to limit the bait's dilution ratio. A lot of you guys have been around a long time, have heard the old glug sentiment, right? With pesticides, if one glug works, 2 or 3 glugs must work a whole lot better, right? And I know a box of grain, of course, doesn't go glug, but remember, it doesn't take a whole lot of Avitrol to get the job done. All we need enough active in that bird system where it's reacting, communicating to the rest of the flock that there's a problem with the site, and then getting those birds to leave the site and then that bird reacting and flying off without side effects later, right? So first thing is we limit the dilution ratio, and the dilution ratio that we recommend for no-kill is a 1 to 40. 1 part treated to 40 parts untreated, 41 total parts. 1 to 40, that's what we recommend, and that's what EasyBlend is set up as, a 1 to 40 dilution ratio. We also recommend breaking the deployment up to 10 birds per tray. So every flock is going to have dominant flock members, and what those flock members are going to do is they're going to get in there, they're going to gorge themselves on active bait, and then they'll overdose potentially on the bait. We don't want that to happen. So what we don't want is we don't want so few trays out there that we have some dominant birds that get in there, hover over the bait in the tray, and they keep other birds from being able to get in there and feed. Right? So this is why we want to break this up to about 10 birds per tray. Think about it like this. Our dilution ratio is like putting a needle in a haystack. Then from there, when we're breaking it up to about 10 birds a tray, it's like taking that haystack and then spreading that out all over the place. It allows other birds to get in there around dominant birds, feed, and do all of that kind of stuff. And then we get our reactions right, and we get those birds to leave the site. We also want to limit the time frame that the birds have access to the treated bait. So oftentimes in some of these situations, we're talking about things like overnight rotation, or we're talking about, first thing in the morning deployment. So for instance, if I'm talking about a garden center location, let's take like a Lowe's, right? Their store hours are from 6 a.m. I think to 10 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and then on Sunday it's 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Right. So what an overnight rotation, a lot of teams that we work with are doing work in these garden centers will do something like this, where they'll deploy maybe Saturday night and then rotate back in at 7:30 the next morning, Sunday morning, pull that live bait and replace it with pre-bait. Right. But what I want to try and do is catch the bird at first feeding, first thing in the morning. So around daybreak. Think about it like this. You take a medicine on an empty stomach. And what happens? Well, it enters your bloodstream a whole lot faster and all that kind of stuff. I've had some guys almost relate it to like alcohol poisoning or something like that too. And you can go that direction with it, I guess, if you'd like. But essentially what we want is we want immediate grounded reaction. And the way to get that is to catch them at first feeding time. So what I'm not going to do is deploy my live bait at, let's say, 5 p.m. because the birds are still actively feeding and we're using a pretty light blend. Right? So the chances are then the bird's stomach is full and I might not get a reaction at all if I do it that way, or I might get a really weak reaction instead. Whereas if I could catch them at first feeding, 5:30 or so in the morning, sometime around daybreak, instead, I'm going to get that immediate grounded reaction that I'm going for. And during that time frame, the other cool part is, remember, I need birds to communicate to the rest of the flock that there's a problem with the site. Well, they can't communicate to the rest of the flock if the rest of the flock isn't there around them. The problem is if I'm deploying bait and it's like 2 p.m., I might get a couple of birds that are actually feeding and maybe reacting, but maybe the rest of the flock isn't there around them, which means then I'm not scaring that flock and getting the rest of the flock to leave, which means I've got to do more rotations and all that kind of stuff, right? And I don't want to have to do that. So really what I'm going for is early morning feeding. So those are my keys to, the keys to a goal of no kill, coming and doing these treatments, no kill at these sensitive locations. Let me get into really quickly the actual treatment side of this here. I'm going to talk about survey, job setup. We'll talk about pre-baiting. We'll talk about live bait monitoring here. And then I'll open it up for questions and answers. So I'm going to kind of run through some of these areas here fairly quickly. But what am I looking for during my overall survey? First of all, I'm trying to determine what kind of bird am I dealing with? Am I dealing with pigeons? Am I dealing with sparrows, starlings? In our certification training, we do get a little bit more into depth in like nest identification, where to find some of the nests, what are some of the differences between the species, habits and habitats, and some different things like that. Like I was saying earlier, we're working to bring you some more value. So I may get into some bird biology stuff and post some videos with regard to that and feeding habits. Again, like I was saying, if you guys think that's a good idea, post that, that you'd like to see a video like that or something like that. Again, we're looking for content to make sure that we're bringing value to you. I'm also thinking about how many birds do I have there on site. And I don't recommend standing there and counting out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to my 300 bird infestation if you're not used to determining how many birds you've got on site, which, by the way, is going to determine your infestation size, is going to determine your job cost, what you're charging for the job. So you want to have a fairly accurate ballpark. One of the best ways to do that is to visually count out what 5 birds look like, and then scale that across the flock that you see there on site. That's one of the best ways to do that. Eventually, after you do enough of these, you'll start to be able to determine how many birds on site based on the number of or the size or spread of the droppings. I don't have a great shortcut to be able to get there other than experience, but just know that as you see more infestations, you'll start to more accurately and easily determine what the size of the infestation is. Where are the heaviest signs of droppings and other messes as I'm surveying? Now, this is not during my, I call survey almost like a 2-tier survey. I've got my initial, right, where I'm trying to determine what my job cost is going to be. And then I've got my more in-depth survey where I'm getting ready for job site setup. So what I'm talking about right now is a survey that occurs after I've already gotten a yes from the client, right? I will do a separate something on that initial one. And that is something that our team does help with on the proposal side in determining whether or not the customer is kind of a player at the price before going out and spending 4 hours doing an in-depth survey and all of that kind of stuff, right? You don't need a 4-hour survey to be able to get a number in a customer's hands and determine, which way they want to go. That's something that we can help you out with if that's something you're looking for. But where are the heavy signs of droppings and other messes? Because this is going to help me determine where I'm actually deploying my trays and that kind of thing. How am I going to access treatment areas? Is there rooftop access, right? One of the things I'm looking for all the time are HVAC units on the roof when we're talking about some of these facilities, because if there's HVAC units, generally there's going to be some type of roof access, HVAC units up on the roof, right? The other part too to keep in mind is oftentimes they've got that condensation drip when we're talking about these HVAC units on the roof. Remember, food, water, harborage, those are the 3 things that anything needs to survive, right? So where's the water source? Well, that water source may be right there on the roof where near where that condensation drip is there for those HVAC units. So that's something to keep in mind, particularly, right, if I'm thinking about sparrows. Sparrows don't need a whole lot of food or water to survive. They're kind of like mice with wings, right? They don't require a whole lot. So that condensation drip that might be right there where those HVAC units are might just literally be enough water for sparrows to survive. That may be their only water source on site, right? So, but I'm looking at these access to these treatment areas. How am I going to get materials on those locations, up to those locations and planning it? And I've seen a few different ways to do that. Obviously the most ideal scenario is if I've got roof access and it's an elevator. That's amazing. I know that can be very hit and miss, right? A lot of times it'll be a staircase. Oftentimes it'll be a ladder. I'm also looking for, are we talking about covered ladders, right? Or are we talking about something different? I may set up a pulley system actually to get some of those materials up on top of the roof. Again, I won't go into a whole lot of depth on some of those pieces, but again, that may be separate content. So again, just let me know if you're looking for some of that type of content. But so things I'm looking for, what kind of bird am I dealing with, right? Correct identification. Okay, obviously this shot right here is pigeons, right? But I want to make sure I'm getting some good education as to what type of bird I'm looking at. I want to make sure that I'm getting a bird count. And I'm just showing some pictures. I know I talked about those things that I'm looking for during survey, but I want to show you some pictures. I'm getting a bird count. Okay, what's this count of 5 look like? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, now I know what a group of 5 looks like. What does that look like across the entirety of the flock that I'm looking at here, right? These are things that I'm thinking about, things that I'm looking at. Where are my heaviest signs of bird activity? look up, look down, right? Because down on the ground, if I've got droppings on the ground, like that picture down there on the lower right, my infestation obviously is directly right up above me. That again, that does sound obvious, but you might be surprised how many times we'll be out there, with a specialist or something, and they're looking for signs of bird activity, and all they're doing is looking up for signs of bird activity. But looking on the ground is a great place to be able to spot bird activity. So when I'm in these environments, right? If I'm in, like these shots are taken inside of a garden center, right? If I'm in these environments, these are some things I'm looking for. Obviously, if I've got birds that are loafing on some of these beams and some of this piping, I'm going to have droppings and splatter and some things like that right back behind some of the walls, right? If I've got some nesting activity happening back up in some of the beams, I'm going to have probably some splatter activity. I'm looking for that. I'm looking at some of these racks, right? On the underside of the racks where birds are using these as loafing areas, I'm going to see some droppings along some of this racking. Right. So this is where I'm looking for some of these signs of bird activity, looking at some of the inventory. Right. This is a big grocery store that also has a covered A-frame garden center. So I'm looking for droppings down here on the ground, droppings on some of the inventory, droppings on some fencing areas and that kind of thing, droppings on the ground, right? These are all things that I'm looking for. I'm looking for signs of nesting, particularly if I've got some of this corrugated metal area, right? I'm looking for nests being tucked back in there, especially for cavity nesters like sparrows. Some of the loading dock areas, right, in the rears of the store and that kind of thing. A lot of these, note that a lot of these cushions actually provide perfect staging for birds to land and loaf, observe, make sure everything's safe beforehand, and then fly right into these open bay doors, right? So I'm looking at some of these areas for bird activity and then determining, where it is that I'm going to place trays from that point. I'm looking at, again, I said earlier, remember I told you guys some of the steps. Access to the treatment area. Overhead photos are really great, a great way to be able to determine where I've got some overhead access. Google Maps is pretty amazing. Technology, satellite view has made it pretty amazing for me to be able to determine if I've got an access point. And a little trick, if you're not aware, you actually have the ability to hold down specific keys like control, or if you're on a Mac or something, command, and actually pivot and rotate that picture around and get a three-dimensional view of what that rooftop looks like. And a lot of times that'll actually show you what that access even looks like, right? Even from a distance, which is pretty cool what we can do from a technology standpoint now. Again, materials I've got to get on the roof. How am I going to get my pre-bid on the roof? How am I going to get my trays on the roof? How am I going to, get my active on the roof, right? How many trays do I need based on my infestation, right? If I've got 100 birds, 10 trays. I'm breaking up to 10 birds a tray, right? If I've got 200 birds, 20 trays, 300 birds, 30 trays, 50 birds, 5 trays, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just taking my infestation size, dividing it by 10, and that's what tells me how many trays I need. How much pre-bait do I need? And this is something where you can leverage, if you guys aren't aware, there's an app that we've got. You can get to it on the homepage of the site, but what you type in is your infestation size, and it will actually spit out and tell you how much pre-bait you need for the treatment, right? So I would leverage a tool like that. This is also something that our support team helps with too. So if you guys are trying to determine what you need, let us know, and that's something that we can send you and help you out there, right? From there, we're talking about setting up this job, right? So where am I placing trays? Closest to the areas with the heaviest signs of activity. That's really what I'm looking for. The idea is, remember, the birds already flagged this as being a safe place. Their scent is there. Their droppings contain a very unique scent that acts as an attractor for others in the flock, right? So I am looking for areas where I've got heavy signs of bird activities. I want where they've already flagged it as being safe. If I'm talking about, now here's one thing I am going to mention this. Do not put your trays on top of the ledges, on top of the parapet walls. Just because I know I'm saying, place the trays where the signs of heavy activity are, but if I place it on top of that parapet ledge, the chance that, a tray falls over or something else happens is really high. I don't want that to happen. So if I've got a large rooftop, let's say it's got a parapet ledge, what's happening is those birds are not roosting, loafing, and nesting on the ledge. They're moving back and forth from one place on the site to another place on the site. I'm going to place my trays center of the rooftop. That's where that's going to go. And then I'm probably going to run a pre-bait trail from that ledge over to the tray. That'll train the bird to actually feed out of the tray, and you'll be able to get your feeding from there. I'm going to place an equal amount of pre-bait in each tray, right, just based on what I determine my overall pre-bait number to be. And again, I know for sure I will do some separate video content on determining how much pre-bait you need, and how to determine how that goes in the tray and all of that kind of stuff, because I think that part is pretty critical. So we will definitely put out some content on that for you. Make sure that you keep a container with the pre-bait on site is what we recommend for large jobs. Like some of these jobs, it might be, for instance, 600 pounds of pre-bait that you need, in which case I would consider actually keeping something like a Rubbermaid tub or something like that on site that's got your pre-bait on it, so you can get in there, access that pre-bait, and then deploy it instead of having to haul feed, back and forth every single time you show up on location. And then from there, you're establishing when you'll be on location to apply. I'll talk about how often that should be here in just a minute. But here's some overheads really quickly on tray placement, right? Large store here, A-Frame Garden Center, all that kind of stuff on the store. And I've got a lot of activity. I've got birds that are on, maybe the east side of the building, west side of the building. I'm determining where my heaviest concentrations of activity are, and then actually selecting my tray placement sites there so you can see how that setup looks. See, you've got your bay doors right here where you've got birds that are loafing. They're loafing on top of those cushions, but they're also right up over here. Notice these HVAC units right near those dock doors. Decent chance I've got my condensation drip and all that right there, right, where birds are going after a water source. These are things that I'm looking at, right? If I'm looking to deploy in a garden center, a very popular way to deploy at the garden centers are in some of these rack positioning locations, right? So these are things that I'm taking into consideration. If I've got, whether it be a parking garage or something like that, and I've got birds that are in these spaces and I've got enough clearance, enough overhead clearance, these may be places where I'm going to go ahead and deploy trays, right? But I'm just determining where I'm going to place those trays. From there, I get into the pre-baiting process, right? Here's one of the things you want to do is deploy enough pre-bait for 100% feeding. That's a common mistake that we see teams make, right? Is let's say there's a shopping center they're dealing with. They'll look at, let's say the Best Buy, which is where they're doing the work or who they're doing the work for, and they'll say, okay, it looks like I've got 10 birds that are loafing here on top of the parapet ledge of the Best Buy. But if they drive around and take a look at what's happening at the shopping center, there'll actually be 100 birds there overall. I actually want to deploy enough pre-bait for the entirety of the flock that's there. I want them to essentially switch food sources. Remember, I'm pre-baiting to establish a trusted food source, get the birds feeding on it, and then from there deploying live bait so that they associate their negative reaction with the site and not with the food they're eating. If they trust the food source, from there, when they have a negative reaction, they're going to associate that negative reaction with the site and not with the food source. The way I'm going to set that up is I'm going to plan on visiting a site twice a week or every 3 days to check on and refill trays, and I'm going to plan to pre-bait for 4 weeks. So 2 trips a week for 4 weeks is what I'm proposing and what I'm going to plan on. It doesn't mean that it's going to take that long, but you'd rather under-promise and over-deliver rather than being on the other side and say, hey, we're going to have great acceptance and it's going to take 2 weeks, and you show up on week 3 and the customer's like, hey, what's going on, right? So it's better to under-promise and over-deliver. I would recommend proposing these at 4 weeks, 2 trips a week. Now, if you show up after the first pre-baiting and your trays are just wiped out, right, you're good to go in live. So you don't have to continue on with that 4-week process, but you are planning with enough time. Of course, we're interacting with wildlife. We don't know exactly how long it's going to take them, but 4 weeks should be an abundance of time to get the feeding that you're looking for. Do not, and I repeat, do not consider deploying live bait until 60% of the feed is consumed between feedings or more. And that's not going to be linear. I can tell you that for sure right now. If I put 10 trays out, I'm not going to show up and 6 of my trays are cleaned out and 4 trays are untouched, right? What's going to happen is I'm going to have 3 trays that are cleaned out. I'm going to have like 2 trays have 70% feeding. And then I'm going to have 2 other trays that have that have 30% feeding or something like that. I just want to make sure that 60% of the feed that I put out is consumed between visits overall, because that means I've got good pre-bait acceptance. From there, I'm moving on to the live bait portion of it, and I know it's 2 for those of you guys who've been on here. So I'm running just a touch over here, but I want to make sure I kind of get through this segment here for those of you guys who've been waiting for the ops piece of it. Getting onto the live bait side of it, using the Easy Blend product, you're going to want to make sure that you mix thoroughly for 60 seconds. And there is a specialized mixer that you want to use. Actually, what's showed on screen, and that's not even the Easy Blend product on screen, it's just a generic shot there. But what showed on screen, I don't recommend those mixers. What will happen is A, they don't mix very well, but B, the grain will actually get caught in those corners there, and you'll have like a lot of grain kick out and spill and all that stuff when you pull the mixer out. The specialized attachment, the one that we sell, actually has like a 4 to 6 inch width on the paddles, and it provides really even distribution of the mix, and that's really what you want. So blend thoroughly for 60 seconds. You deploy your live bait or active bait evenly across all of your baiting trays. So here's what I'm not going to do. Let's say I put 10 trays out during pre-baiting, and during pre-baiting I have 7 trays that get hit really well and 3 trays that don't get touched. What I'm not going to do is deploy across all 10 trays as they are, because that means I'm going to waste live bait. But what I'm also not going to do is deploy the live bait only in 7 trays that were supposed to go in 10 trays. Instead, what I'm going to do is go get my other 3 trays, bring those over to the trays that are getting hit, and deploy across all of those trays evenly. I'm going to swap my pre-bait for live bait either the night before I talked about that overnight rotation thing, or first thing in the morning around 5 or so a.m., somewhere in there, and remove the live bait really within a 2 to 3 hour active feeding window. That's really what I'm looking for. Remember, my goal is no kill, so this is what I'm looking for, is to limit the time of exposure. So I'm going to make sure inside that active feeding window, which is going to be first thing in the morning or so, that live bait is deployed in that stretch. Remember that recovery of underdosed birds is going to occur within 4 to 5 hours without side effects. So think about that side of it there, and have that as an expectation. From there, you'll want to plan a live bait for 4 weeks, and that's 1 live bait rotation per week by 4 weeks. That's really what you're looking for there. 1 live bait rotation per week by 4 weeks. A rotation is live bait goes down, live bait gets picked up. That may be 2 trips, right? Most of the time that is going to be 2 trips, so you want to plan for that accordingly. And we do have some tools to help kind of price what those rotations look like too. So I know that'll be content that we'll also get into and get out for you, as well as the pricing piece of this. But it's 1 live bait rotation per week by 4 weeks is what we're looking for. So that's an 8-week clean out. That's 4-week pre-bait, 4-week live bait. From that point, after we live bait and the birds are gone, if I show up at the site, and let's say on my second rotation, I show up and there's no feeding on the trays and there's no birds, I am great to go and move into monitoring. Otherwise, otherwise from a proposal standpoint, your monitoring process begins after the 8-week clean out, right? And that's going to be set up as a 10-week program. Monitoring, just like anything else in pests, is going to reduce the chances of significant reinfestation. So here's what's not going to happen. You're not going to repel a flock of 100 birds and then show up there 3 months later and 100 birds are there. Remember, these infestations start small and they grow with time, is how that works. So I want to reduce the chances of reinfestation, and what monitoring is going to do is allow you to catch, if there are birds that start to show back up on site, you're going to be able to catch those birds and be able to effectively treat them. When you move into the monitoring program, you're going to reduce the number of trays on site. You're going to reduce it by 20%, you're going to reduce it to 20%, not by 20%. So if I've got let's say I've got 10 trays out there. I'm going to reduce it down to like 2 trays when I move into the monitoring program. And those trays are going to be in the areas where I know the heaviest bird activity was before, right? I'm just going to keep a tray there, and it's going to be half a cup of pre-bait or untreated grain that's going to go in each one of those trays, right? Those are going to get checked once every 30 days for signs of activity. So what I'm going to do when I show up to check those trays is, 1, I'm going to check and see if I've got feeding. 2, I'm going to check and see if I've got droppings present in the tray. 3, I'm going to take a look at the pre-bait that's in there and try to determine whether or not, I've got moldy grain or something like that, in which case I'm going to replace that. The one thing I'll point out is we've got 2 different tray sizes designed to help you guys, a 2 foot by 2 foot tray and an 18 by 12 inch. Those are equipped with graded and slotted drains so that your bait, and the drains are wide enough so the bait doesn't slip through. But they're small enough where the water drains out so your bait doesn't just sit in water when it rains. So that allows you to kind of put that grain out there during your monitoring program, and for that grain then to like sit in the sun or dry out and that kind of thing. So you have to do less rotations from a moldy grain standpoint and all of that kind of stuff. So that's going to be set up and proposed as a 10-month program. One trip per month or every 30 days for 10 months. So generally set up and sold as a 12-month overall program, 4-week pre-bait, 4-week live bait, 10-month follow-up, 12-month program. What that does also do is provide some flexibility for the client and allow them to also break out the pricing over 12 months. So we've seen teams do it one of 2 ways. Some teams will do a contract and then take the entire price and break that out over the entirety of the 12 months. And then what other teams will do is on their initial, they'll charge like the cost of materials plus the cost of, the first month of labor on their initial, and then they'll take the remainder of the price and then break that out over 12 months over contract too. You could do that either one of 2 ways. And that's a great way to provide some flexibility to the client and make the program a lot more affordable there. The other thing I want to point out to you really quickly here is in that handout section of your box, there is something that says Avitrol system for use at sensitive sites. That there is also customer facing, but it's a good reference document that we put together for you. That actually breaks down this process. The treatment process. So that 12-month program I was talking about, it actually breaks that out for you, so you have something to reference there. So that's the breakout there of the process. Okay, what I want to do here really quickly is skip ahead, and I am going to jump into questions for those of you guys who have presented some questions. I appreciate you guys waiting patiently. So hold on just a second here. I'm going to pull up the question box. Let's see what some of the questions are here, and I'm going to try and answer some of these questions. So hold on here. Okay, let's see. Quite a few questions. Let me look through here. Several of you guys, and I appreciate several of you guys are replying on some of the video ideas and things that I've talked about throughout this. So I'll make sure that we pay attention to that piece of it and make sure we get you some good information out from that standpoint. Let's see here. All right, I'm reading through one here. They're asking for, and this is Travis is asking about recommendations, talking to a store when you notice bird issues, particularly if they already, maybe they say they've got a provider, maybe a pest provider in general. My main question is, if they have a bird issue currently, first of all, we want to try and establish whether or not they're interested in doing something about the birds in the first place, right? So I do want to make sure that I get some clarity and direction from them as to whether or not they want to do something about it. Because my main question is, remember this, it's only something like 10% of companies that offer bird services. So simply because a location has someone that's doing the service doesn't mean that whoever it is that's doing the service actually offers bird service as well. So it's either one of two things that are happening if they have birds and they have a provider. Either their provider is not being particularly attentive when they're there on location and suggesting solutions, or that particular location doesn't want to do anything about the birds and they've already been talked to about it, right? So one of the first things I want to try and establish is whether or not they want to do something about the birds in the first place. And then the second part of that as well is I want to also determine and see if I can get something in their hands. I want to find out whether or not they've got a bid in, if someone has ever offered to do a bid or anything like that. And at the end of the day, I want to try and get something in their hands so they could actually give a fair comparison. I don't know what their bid would have been previously, right? If it was the same process or anything like that for comparing apples to apples. So I want to try and make sure that I get something in their hands as quickly as possible is really what I'm looking for, so that I can set up the next. One of the things that I'll mention as well too is this is an area where of expertise where our sales team comes in and does help with some of these types of things, as well as finding that window in. One of the advantages here is that oftentimes, because we're helping with corporate accounts across North America, a lot of times we have a contact as well that may be a corporate contact to help move forward and that kind of thing. So there's some things that we can help with there. So hopefully, Travis, hopefully that helps to answer your question. I've got another question here from Harry. Harry is asking, he says, you were talking about exterior use. Can I use Avitrol in the interior buildings? So there's no restriction on indoor use of Avitrol products. We do a lot of indoor treatment, but we do recommend indoor use as kind of a last resort. Remember that interior infestations are always the result of a larger exterior infestation. It's always spillover from an exterior infestation. And particularly if I've got large bay doors, I've got birds that are moving back and forth freely from one spot to another spot on site there. They're moving inside of the building, and then from there, they're flying out through bay doors. They're loafing on parapet ledges, or they're in the center of the rooftop, or they're on the sign out there doing something, right? But they're not roosting, loafing, and nesting in this one spot, unless they're just trapped on the inside of the building, in which case we're talking about, kind of a different scenario. But most of the time, the birds are moving freely in and out, and typically with Avitrol, I'm going to get about a quarter mile of repelling. So the cool part is I can come in and do an exterior treatment, get that flock to leave the site, and then from there, take a look and see if I have to do an interior treatment in the first place. I may not have to do any kind of interior work, but particularly in this environment right now, everybody essentially wants exterior service, right, as kind of things are going along with the social distancing and all that stuff right now. So really exterior is what I'm looking for there. Okay, let me get to another question here. Okay, Keith is asking, thank you for your question, Keith. Keith is asking, how do we prevent other birds from getting into it? How do we keep non-targets from getting into active bait? And that's an important question. So there are a couple things to consider when I'm out on site and I'm surveying. One, of course, I'm keeping an eye open for grain feeding non-targets. And I'm going to stress that again, grain feeding non-targets. One of the questions that our support team has to field on a regular basis will be something like, man, I've got a hawk or something back behind the site. I must not be able to treat. There's no secondary poisoning with Avitrol products. So if something comes along and eats that thing that's reacting, that thing it eats, it'll be just fine. One of the recent ones that I dealt with was a chemical plant where we were doing a no-kill treatment on pigeons, working with the team. And it was no kill across the board, except for one unfortunate pigeon, where all of a sudden crows came out of nowhere, and man, we're just going to town on this bird that was reacting, and it was a complete mess. So those crows were just fine. They didn't have, and crows are on the label for Avitrol, but those crows were just fine, and unfortunately, it was a pretty bad day for the pigeon there. So I'm looking for grain feeding non-targets. The other piece of that is also making a distinction, right, between not just predator birds, but other types of non-targets that might be there, right? Another one that our team might have to field will be, man, I've got the shopping center and there are American robins there. I mustn't be able to treat. Well, American robins are not grain feeders. So again, these are things to think about and consider, and make sure you know. Again, I would use on the app that's on the front page of the site there, which is free, by the way. There is a feature on there called Bird ID, and Bird ID does talk about a lot of these different types of things and help with some of the identification piece of it. But the other part of that that I would recommend is allaboutthebirds.org, which is Cornell's research site. Actually has some other really, really great information about what some of these types of birds feed on, whether they're grain feeders, whether they're insect feeders, and different things like that. So those are all things that I'm looking for. The other thing to keep in mind too is that these bird species, particularly when we start getting into essentially everything besides pigeons and these pest bird species, so like sparrows, starlings, grackles, that kind of thing, they're very, very aggressive and very territorial. So what they'll do is they'll actively work to push anything else out of the food source. So also keep that in mind as you're looking to deploy. Now, it is different if you end up with a situation where you're pre-baiting and you actively do have birds that are getting into your pre-bait, then you have to adjust the treatment. I won't go into a whole lot of depth there, but Keith, if that's a situation that you're dealing with or have dealt with, that's probably an offline conversation or something like that. But I'd be more than happy to help answer that question for you. All right, let me see here. And again, I'm going through pretty thoroughly here, trying to answer some of these questions here. So I am taking kind of an that was one of the things in the last session. You guys asked for a more extended time of Q&A. So I'm taking some time out here to extend some of this time of Q&A and answer some of these questions. So those of you guys who are on, please feel free to continue posting these questions. I'm going to try and answer them and make sure you're well equipped by the time we get done here. Let's see here. Let's see. Gary is asking, thank you for your question, Gary. Gary is asking what birds are on the Avitrol label. And we've got several subspecies or primary species, and then 13 total birds that include subspecies that are actually on the labels. So pigeons, sparrows, starlings, multiple species of grackle, the blackbird species. So that's like red-winged blackbird, yellow-headed blackbird, brewer's blackbird, and other types in the blackbird family. Crows, multiple species of crow. And let's see, I think I'm trying to make, cowbirds. That's right. I want to make sure I wasn't forgetting something there. Cowbirds, that's another one that's on the label as well. And those are all those are the primary species, and then there's subspecies that are under those. In reference to actually looking at, let's see, Joe is asking, can Avitrol be used on Muscovy ducks? And Frank is asking, what about Avitrol use for gulls? So this ties in with Gary's question, right, about what birds are on the label. So Muscovy ducks, of course, and gulls are not on the label, but where we still help teams take care of those birds with baiting treatments, and we do that with a depredation permit is what's required to go ahead and go with those treatments. So we do that on the coast a lot for resort hotels or the condo properties. But there's a lot of gull activity in the center of the country as well. When we're talking about like areas near big waste disposal areas and different things like that. A lot of gull activity. And then up north, we talk about Michigan and Wisconsin and some places like that. Even a lot of these food processing locations end up with a lot of gull activity. And so we do help teams with permit baiting for those scenarios. So if any of you guys are running into any of those scenarios and you need help, we keep a updated copy of the depredation permit on hand. And then we keep an updated copy of the depredation order and the reporting requirement stuff on hand as well too. So that's something that we could absolutely get to you. Let me see here. Let me look at some more questions here. I appreciate you guys continuing to post. Let's see here. This one's a longer one here, so bear with me a second while as I read through this here. Okay, so Edgardo, and I apologize if I butchered your name there. Absolutely apologize about that. But thank you so much for your question. He's saying, I'm interested in expanding the scope of services that I provide. How do I get guidance on introducing that on bird control services to offer existing and future customers? Edgardo, that is 100% what we are here for. So one of the best ways to do that, let's see, on the screen, there's a phone number to our support team that we set up as a quick access for you. That number, 918-947-9615. If you text that number asking, hey, I want help on getting bird control service set up or something like that. If you text that question to that phone number, they will actually reach out and work to get you all set up and kind of work through things all together with you. We provide materials to help you with the marketing piece of that, which is free. We actually help propose a lot of the jobs as well. So we'll even, provide you with initial proposal and all that kind of stuff to provide to the client that has a breakdown in pricing and talks about, what the treatment looks like and all that kind of stuff. We help you price it. And then, of course, we help you with the execution as well. So, I mean, there is a myriad of support that we have for you to take you from sort of 0 to 60 in your journey in the bird control space. But man, welcome to the bird control space. I'm excited for you to start your journey, and we're more than happy to help you at any phase of the journey. Let's see here. Let me look. Okay. Hey, shout out Shaylin. Thank you. I see you've posted a few different things in here, it looks like. And she was saying thanks, and I'll definitely be utilizing support in the future to get going and all of that. And Shaylin, thank you so much for the feedback. We are definitely here to help you. We want to help you win, and that is my heart, and that is our heart as a team. So I really hope as you interact with our team, that we can help you see success during this kind of time where things are a little bit crazy, but then on down the road as well too. So thank you so much for the feedback there. Let's see, I'm going to answer a few more questions here. There are so many of them here, so I'm trying to be respectful of your time, but I extended kind of this time of question and answer so I can try to get some answers to you. Summer posted a question. Thank you for your question, Summer. She said, can I share this presentation with my team in some way, shape, or form? The answer is yes. There are a couple things. One, we're recording this session, and even though this is an extended time of questions and answers, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that we provide you with the question and answer session on the backside. So we're recording this in video format. The other thing I'm going to do, which I don't normally do, but again, I'm going to try and make sure we get more tools in your hand, is I'm also going to give you guys the deck, like the slide deck for this presentation too, following up. So you'll get an email that has a link to the video and a link to the slide deck. so that you can share with your team. Those of you guys who are field trainers, maybe you can use it to help train your team and do different things like that. We do also offer free webinar-based training, webinar-based ops training, and webinar-based sales training to kind of help there. Man, I've got a few different people here that are asking about the certification program and asking with everything that's going on, is the certification program going to be made available online? Because, yeah, normally the program is an in-person program. What we're doing here is we're keeping an eye open on what CDC is saying and putting out as far as the distancing piece and the travel piece and all of that kind of stuff. And so if this extends too much for the past 30 to 45 days, what our team will do is start to provide some structured distance learning sessions that allow you guys to certify that way. We do prefer in person because there's some hands-on elements and there's some context and things that are created in person that you get. And believe me, again, I said my background is technology, so I am a huge proponent of technology and distance learning. We've tried it a few different ways, and we found the most effective way to be in person. But at the same time, man, again, we want to try and make sure we're getting you value. And of course, the biggest thing is we want to make sure that guys are able to get trained, especially during this time. So it is something that our team is looking at currently, and in a path that we may go down. So we'll keep you guys who ask those questions posted on that side of it. Let's see. I am going to take time to answer 2 more questions here, and then I'll let you guys get out of here. Let's see. Tony asks, I'm having trouble getting birds to feed. What do I do? So I'm assuming, and thank you, Tony, so much for your question. I'm assuming that you've got a job going currently, and you guys are pre-baiting, and you're having trouble getting the birds to actually feed on the pre-bait. So there are a few different things that I'm looking for in those kind of scenarios. First of all, the question I'm asking myself is, one, where are my trays positioned? How close are they to the signs of bird activity? So for instance, if I've got birds that are hanging out, right here by the HVAC unit, I want to try and put my tray as close to that activity as possible. That's really what I want to do. Or I'm going to create a pre-bait trail from one spot and trail it all the way over to where my trays are to train them to eat of it. Really similar to a trapping program, right? Where you're running that. For those of you guys who've done trapping, you don't just throw food in the trap and then wait for birds to show up. You do something on the exterior of the trap, and then from there allow birds to move freely back and forth into the trap and acclimate to it. So one of the things I'm thinking about is, where are my trays positioned? The other thing I'm thinking about there, Tony, is I'm also wondering, what kind of tray am I using? Sometimes what we'll run into is teams will be using like pie pans or plastic trays or something like that. The trays that we sell are made of a combination of plywood and hardwood, and they're made of wood for a reason. Birds' droppings have a very, very unique scent to them, and wood absorbs that scent very, very well and ends up acting as an attractor. And it absorbs the scent of what's happening on the site. Remember, birds are pretty specific. Those of you guys who've been on site and observed bird activity have probably thought at some point, man, I wonder how come the birds are hanging out in this part of the property, but they're not hanging out over here on this part of the property. That has to do with how safe those birds feel in this area versus that area. There's predator approach and other things that they're looking for to try to make sure that they keep themselves safe, right? And so what I want to make sure that from a tray standpoint, that the tray that I'm using is one that is not going to work against me, that doesn't make noise, that's not shiny. Remember, there are bird deterrents that are out there that make noise and they're shiny and all sorts of stuff. You want the birds to feel perfectly comfortable as they're acclimating to the pre-bait and kind of go from there. And then my third kind of last resort there is if I'm using the right kind of prebait, if I've got the right kind of trays and the trays are in the right position, that's when I'm potentially looking at attractants, right? So one attractant that we've seen really, really great luck with here over the last few years has actually been scrambled eggs. I know that sounds a little crazy, a little cannibalistic, or whatever you want to call it, right? But yeah, scrambled eggs actually acts as a pretty good potential attractant, right? So that's one that I would potentially look at. I'm not going to get into all the details on attractant baiting. There are some specific things that may be something that we also look at putting some content out about as well. And let me see. Let me look at one more question here. Okay, it looks like Ray is asking about how do I price these jobs, and this is real similar. The answer to this is real similar to the one that I gave earlier. The phone number there on the screen, that 918-947-9615 number. If you text that you'd like help with pricing over to that number, someone from the support team will reach out and they will actually help you put together all of the pricing piece of it. But really remember what I was saying. The key to the pricing is I'm on phase 1 of the program, which is pre-baiting. I'm bidding that as a 4-week process with 2 trips per week across 4 weeks, right? From a live bait standpoint, I'm doing 1 rotation per week, which is generally going to be 2 trips. So 1 rotation per week times 4 weeks. And then on the monitoring program, it's 1 trip per month across my 10 months. So 12 months is how I'm going to structure that from a proposal standpoint. The infestation size is what's going to determine the overall price, because that's also going to determine how many hours it takes to, of course, get up on the roof, to refill my trays, to rotate in my live bait, and that kind of thing, right? If I've got a distance to get to the site, right? Like if it's further than about 45 minutes to an hour away from where I'm leaving, I'm going to build some extra travel time into my hourly and different things like that. These are all things that our support team is trained to help you with, and what we help teams with all over the country on a regular basis. So please leverage that resource. Okay. Man, I have taken a lot of time to answer some questions. I really, really appreciate all of you guys. If there are any questions that haven't gotten answered, and there's still quite a few questions here, our team will be in contact with you to answer those questions. But I really appreciate your time. I thank you guys all so much for being on. And man, again, we're standing with you guys. We're standing with your families, praying for your families, all that stuff. And hopefully we can all come through this together and come through stronger than we ever have been before. So take care, guys, and have a great rest of your week.